Dear professors and venerable colleagues, I am Burak Pirdal, Research Assistant at Yıldırım Beyazıt University. Today I will share my presentation named The Link Between Taxation and Fiscal Governance. After a brief introduction, I will talk about aim, scope and methodology, the concept of fiscal governance, the concept of tax and taxation, the linkage between taxation and fiscal governance, and then I will talk about conclusion and policy proposals. Fiscal governance is a policy instrument that expected to increase the fiscal performance of the countries. On the other hand, one of the fundamental factors which affect the fiscal management of the countries is taxation. They can affect each other in different ways. The aim of this study is to reveal the interplay between concepts of taxation and fiscal governance, particularly the impact of taxation on having a sound fiscal governance and to propose policy implications on taxation and fiscal governance. Scope of this study is to analysis of concepts of fiscal governance and taxation and the relationship between these two concepts. And method of the study is descriptive analysis. The fiscal governance can be defined as those rules, regulations, and procedures that influence how budgetary policy is planned, approved, carried out, monitored, and evaluated. Objectives of fiscal governance are generally preventing and sustaining unsustainable fiscal policies that increase debt levels and budget deficits and ensuring access to budgetary indicators, to reduce the cyclical process of the formation of fiscal policies, to ensure and improve the efficiency of fiscal expenditures, and increase the transparency of fiscal policy. According to existing literature, the concept of fiscal governance has four main elements: numerical fiscal rules, medium-term budgetary frameworks, budgetary procedures, and independent fiscal institutions. Numerical fiscal rules. Fiscal rules, which dating back to ancient times, have begun to rely on a legal and constitutional basis over the last 150 years. In this context, we can propose three main periods in the emergence of fiscal rules in the modern world. In the first period, some subnational governments in countries like United States and Sweden adopted Golden Rule and also declared an obligation to have a balanced budget. In the second period after the World War II, a number of developed countries including Germany, Italy, Japan, Netherlands adopted balanced budget rules in order to support their stabilization programs. In the third period, which can also be called current period, the fiscal rules that include restricted balanced budget rules were adopted by several developed and developing countries. Today, the most countries implementing the number of countries implementing fiscal rules is close to 100. Types of fiscal rules are balanced budget rules, golden rule, and budget deficit rules covering the budget deficit limit, debt rules expressing limitations on total or net public debt, expenditure rules that express a ceiling on the total expenditures on some certain expenditures, and income rules that impose a limit on the tax burden or prevent an increase in unexpected revenues before the period. Independent fiscal agencies. The first independent fiscal agency, which is a sort of fiscal institution in Europe, was founded in 1945 in the Netherlands under the name of Central Planning Bureau. There are two types of independent fiscal agencies: independent fiscal authorities and fiscal councils. Independent fiscal authorities are simply responsible for setting long-term objectives, targets, and adjusting some predetermined tax and expenditure packages. On the other hand, fiscal councils are responsible for providing objective analysis of fiscal policies, independent budget forecasts, and normative assessments of the recommendations. Here is the chart of the fiscal agencies. There are two types of fiscal agencies, as we said before: independent fiscal authorities and fiscal councils, and they have different duties. Medium-term budgetary framework. Medium-term budgetary framework is those fiscal arrangements that allow government to extend the horizon for fiscal policy making beyond the annual budgetary calendar. In this framework, there are at least two approaches to medium-term budgetary framework: procedural approach and quantitative approach. Procedural approach interprets the medium-term budgetary framework as a number of procedures and arrangements that ensures production of multi-annual budgetary figures. However, the latter approach, which is a more quantitative one, considers the medium-term budgetary framework as a set of numbers and budget plan. Budgetary procedures. Strengthening budgetary procedures is the last dimension of the concept of fiscal governance. The seven must be characteristics of budgetary procedures are transparency, multi-annual planning horizon, centralization of the budget process, centralization during execution, the use of top-down budgetary techniques, prudent economic assumptions and reserves, and performance budgeting. The concept of tax and taxation. A tax is a compulsory contribution to the state revenue levied by the government on workers' income, business profits, or added to the other costs of some goods, services, and transactions. Taxes are the most important public revenue for most of the modern states. Through a well-managed taxation process, a country can shape the macroeconomic dynamics in the desired way. When it comes to link between taxation and fiscal governance, a large proportion of public revenues is collected by taxes. When we take into account that primary objective of fiscal rules which is a component of the concept of fiscal governance, is to avoid excessive public debt and budget deficits, the importance of taxation for a sound fiscal governance can be realized. Budget Balanced budget means that public expenditures and revenues are equal. And in order to achieve this objective, taxes should be collected in an efficient way, and taxes in the country shouldn't hinder the functioning of the free market economy. If tax revenues are not sufficient, governments apply to other revenues like public debt, and such a policy may endanger the sustainability of the fiscal policy by increasing the level of public debts. On the other hand, prudent taxation policies are fundamental to sound fiscal governance. Although taxes, which are main components of the public revenue, secure the quality of public services, they also have the potential to hinder the economic performance of the countries if used in a wrong way. A very high tax burden lessens the rate of return for investors and accordingly their willingness to invest, high and grow. Also, a complicated tax system has the potential to hamper the economic productivity. Countries, especially suffering from financial crisis, should implement prudent short-term actions and long-term planning to manage their budget in the best way. Having a competitive tax system is getting more and more important for the economic performance of the countries. And all the information in the budget about taxes and expenditures should be clear, understandable, and to ensure transparency. Budgetary measures taken by the taxes and aims of these measures should be revealed and articulated. Shareholders, I mean parliaments, citizens, and civil society should be able to contribute in a helpful way to the budgetary process, and on the other hand, some independent fiscal authorities, which are a kind of fiscal agency, are responsible for adjusting the level of taxes. For example, one of the tasks of British Office of Budget Responsibility is assessment of functioning tax regulations and budget and public debt stability, for instance. In this context, this kind of organizations should design the taxation policies prudently and in harmony with macroeconomic objectives of the country. Thank you for your attention.